Aloha and welcome to this super quick screencast on the Model View Controller paradigm in play. Let me first say, what MVC is in case you haven't heard of it. If you've done any kind of, user interface development at all, you've probably heard of MVC. But basically, it could potentially be the most famous software design pattern of all. I think Smalltalk was the first language to implement it. And it basically solves this huge problem in the design of systems with user interfaces, which is how do you separate the way you want to internally represent the data, which might be, ultimately as tables in a database, from the way that you present it to the user. And that might be a lot of different ways. That could be HTML, that could be JSON, that could be XML, that could be some, crazy thing in a helmet or whatever, So you want to separate your presentation from the representation, and what is the design pattern that you use to do it? That's what MVC provides. So basically, MVC says, look, we're going to have a model. We're going to have this thing called the model, and the model is basically our representation, our internal representation of the data, which is designed to be easily searchable, easily queryable, easily storable, easily whatever, shardable, however you want your data to be organized and optimized in whatever way on the back end. That's what that model is going to present, and it's all kind of firewalled off in the model area. Okay, then we're going to have a view, which is, or multiple views, which is the processing that's associated with, or the representations that are associated with the user interface, or the other machines that the data is interacting with, or whatever. So when I say user interface, users could be humans, they could be other, processes in the computer, they could be other systems on the internet, anything else. And you could have, and most importantly, you could have many different views for the same model data. And then to mediate the interactions between the model and the view, you have this controller object. Okay? So the basic kind of sequence of events is you start off with your user in the lower portion of the screen. The user is going to do some action which is going to activate a controller, or the controller. And what the controller is going to do is manipulate the model. Somehow that's going to trigger an update to the view, and that will in turn be seen by the user as a change to the user interface. So that's the very generic way that MVC is supposed to be represented. Now, specific systems are going to implement it in slightly different ways. You won't see exactly this control flow, but that's the general relationship between these various components. Okay, so in play, the way MVC is implemented is through three packages, one called controllers, one called views, one called models. Okay, so pretty straightforward. I mean, they really went all in on this whole MVC design pattern. So the controllers package is a place where you have one or more classes. Oftentimes it's just going to be a single class where it has a bunch of public static methods. Those public static methods in play lingo are called actions. Okay, and the idea is that those actions are supposed to take a request and return a result object, where the result object is basically going to encapsulate a view or perspective on the data. Okay, the views package is going to provide, kind of canonically, it's going to provide a bunch of files with this suffix .scala.html, which represent templates. They actually, through a process of play transmogrification, they get converted into both real live HTML that can be seen with a browser, as well as associated Java classes that help with this process of translating data into the view. And these template files are super great because you can do things like have iteration and conditionals and so forth in them, so that, for example, you could have a single file which can represent a table of data where you don't know in advance when you're designing the view how many rows will be in the table or what will be contained in each of the cells of the table and so forth. So that's the kind of the classic thing you want to have. And then finally, there's a package called models. In fact, you'll see in this may be absent in our kind of play applications, pretend play applications, or sample play applications. There isn't even this models package, but we'll be defining one pretty quick in this module anyway. That where you just stick the stuff for the models. In fact, you don't have to name it models. Play doesn't really care. But by convention, if you've got a views package and a controllers package, geez, you better have a models package. Just kind of complete the trio. Okay, so here's a diagram of how these things actually work in play. You're going to start by having an HTTP request come in. That's number one. It goes to the controller. The controller will, usually update the model, though it doesn't necessarily have to in all cases, but that's, one thing that it will do. And then it's going to kind of invoke or somehow, get at a view to decide how to render, or it's going to call a render method on a specific view, which is going to be encapsulated into the response that's returned to the user. Okay? So that's kind of the outline. The little more complicated representation of it is in this diagram here. Starting at the top, you see an HTTP request come in. It goes through a play component called the router, and if you think of your routes file, that's a very high-level specification which is input or is through the transmogrification of play becomes this router object which can look at HTTP requests and say, oh, based on the nature of this HTTP request, I know which specific public static method in the controller package actually needs to be invoked with this Java object which I've constructed from the HTTP request that gives that controller method all the details it needs to know, like what are the strings that were present in the form that the user presumably filled out before they created this HTTP request. Anyway, so then we're down in this middle area with the action. The action can update the model, and then the model always consists of little pink bubbles with little lines between them. I don't know why, but that's some kind of crazy data structure in there, and that could even result in invoking some JDBC stuff to persist the state of the model out to a database, or who knows what. Maybe it goes out to some third-party service and gets some data. We don't really care. Crazy stuff happens in the model, but at the end of the day, the model area returns some data back to this action in the controller, and now the job is to return a view, return some HTML back to the user to say, hey, here's the results of pressing that button or clicking that link or whatever the heck you did. And that process involves accessing one of the views and calling this render method on it, which is going to basically take the template, supply it with the data, and run some play library stuff, which will produce a regular old HTML file that can be displayed in the browser. So that's basically it. MVC in a nutshell. Play does a very good job at it, at abstracting away all the stuff you don't want to worry about and leaving you basically just with the stuff you do want to worry about, kind of as long as you understand how Play does things. So I think you'll have fun.